Hi guys, my name is Christina and today I decided we're gonna talk about my comic story, the story of my story, how I've been working on it throughout I think 11 years at this point, and how it changed, how it was not always a comic, how it at some point was a novel, and everything in between. So I figured it could be a good idea just because I just wanted to show you how messy the process is and how it is totally okay to change things around and, you know, follow intuition and sometimes switch stuff completely. It's gonna be a long video because 11 years, so, you know, grab, you know, your beverage of choice, order Uber Eats. There will be enough time for them to do your order and arrive. And let's begin. The story I'm currently working on is the first time of me experiencing creating a story this large. I obviously was always a creative person. I'm sure like every artist, they always did something. So I always wrote stories here and there. I did a little bit of poetry. I wrote like short stories and whatnot. Sometimes I would do actual comics. I used to draw Fantastic Four, my own version of Fantastic Four. I would like create different Fantastic Four members. I don't know why. Like I like the concept of the comic, but I wasn't necessarily liking the characters. So I created my own. So I was like doodling my own stuff all the time. I think I did a comic that called Bambi too. Anyway, you know, so many hidden gems in here. But yeah, at some point I just got an inspiration. It was really just an inspiration for the story that I'm currently working on. Now it's called the Book of Contradictions. Before it was called Penumbra. I don't even know, the inspiration came really randomly. I think I was watching some YouTube video. You know how there is a fan-made videos of some sort of anime when they put nice music and just, you know, cut the anime a little bit and create this emotional video. And the one I was watching, I guess, was for Anime Helsing, not a VA, like the first one that they did. And I don't know, there was just one image of like a shadow with multiple eyes, and for some reason, I don't know how it's connected even to the final product at this point, but this image really inspired me and I started thinking. And I got more and more ideas as I was thinking about it. And for some reason, I think the reason was because I conceived a character in this moment, and I started thinking about a character, and the more I started thinking about these characters, the more personality they started to have, the more story became around them, and at some point it became so much in my head, so I started to draw a little bit of it. And at least for me, the interesting thing happens when you start actually like drawing or writing the story out. It's like your RAM in your head gets cleaned up, and the more you like draw and write, the more information coming. It's like, oh, we have an available space, so we're gonna keep creating, and then you put it out and then more is coming. And then I was like, ooh, that's interesting. So I created multiple drawings. Actually, I would be putting some of them, I don't like somewhere on screen, the one I can find. Hopefully, I don't think you can find the original ones. I think they're back in Russia, like in the boxes, because I used to draw them on paper with a pen. But yeah, I'll put what I can find. They are atrocious. Let's just say so. Like, be kind. I was very young. I was a kiddo. I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, good. Eventually, I started realizing it's like the whole story. I got ideas for different characters, for some conflict that's happening within the story. There is possibly a war, and there is possibly a fantasy world, and I had like a weird concept for this world started appearing. And I was like, you know what? Well, I'm drawing anyway, might as well draw a comic. Well, it sounds not a big deal at all. So that's what I did. And back then I was studying drawings and everything academically in school, and I did it very traditional way. I actually still like doing this. I did it with pencils, you know, different types of pencils, and all black pencils, but, you know, different level of softness and whatnot. And I did it on paper. I had my eraser, I had my sharpener, I had my pencils, I had a box where I would like, you know, sharpen pencil into, like all this crap. And then I would have like a lot of paper, and it was like one page was the original traditional art drawn one, and I would have another paper to, you know, make sure I don't smudge my pencil. It was like in between my drawing and my hand, and damn, it took a lot of time. And I think I spent like almost a month, and I drew maybe a page and a half, and I loved it. Oh, I loved it. And as I was drawing, even more ideas would be coming in. I would be like, oh, but what this character's past, and what's this guy's story, and more and more. And then like literally scenes started popping out in my head, and I realized, you know what, this story is huge. This story takes years. Characters grow and die throughout the story. It covers a generation. So I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna draw a comic like this? But I wasn't, back then I didn't think it's going to be anything serious. It never occurred to me that I would actually create some product. So I was just having fun with myself. But then slowly I realized, no, this story is big and there's no way I can ever draw it in comic, because especially in traditional way, it's just impossible. It took me so much time to just draw like just 1.5 page, and it was a lot of work. And at this point I realized, no, I want to tell the story. It's not like just I want to tell it, but as I'm expressing this, I'm learning it. So I need to write it out. I need to get it out of me to get more uploads of this information. So I started writing these ideas on, I had like a notebook, and I would write all the ideas in there. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe I should write it as a book. I think I'm gonna go through it faster. So I started typing. It was very, like, obviously I would, again, as I said, I would write, but I never was like, oh, I'm gonna write a novel, a book. And here I was starting writing it. And, you know, it's interesting. I didn't think I'm gonna be one of this person who's like, wow, looking back, I realized how everything was meant to be. But in a sense it was, because back then I had a tutor, Russian language tutor. Let's put some timeline in here before we continue. Okay, probably the story came to me the idea for the story in 2005, and I was playing around with comic, and I started writing it around 2007, yes. 2007, why I'm doing this? 2005, 2007, I started writing it. And back then, I had a Russian language tutor, because I was shit at Russian language. No, but actually, I think I have some sort of dyslexia. I say I think because stuff like this doesn't get diagnosed in Russia. In Russia, people don't believe in stuff like this. People are like, depression, what do you mean? We all get upset sometimes. Man up and go get your shit done, you know? Or you will be like, I think I'm dyslexic, and they will be like, you're just stupid. Just be careful and write correct, you know? So, yeah, in Russia, we don't understand things like this. I don't think the word anxiety exists. Like, I don't know Russian translation for the word anxiety. I suffer from anxiety, so I struggle to explain to my mom what it is. She's like, what's happened to you? I'm like, I think I'm having anxiety. She's like, what do you mean? And I have to say, well, I feel like this, I react to this. I think it's psychologically related to this, then create this physical reaction. And she's like, what? That's my country, hi. And I think I had some sort of dyslexia because I had the problem, I was unable to see that I'm making mistakes. Like, I would always learn the rules, I would learn how the word is supposed to be spelled, but then I would make a mistake and I would never know. And you know, in the end of like some sort of test, they would say, oh, we'll check your grammar, check your spelling, blah, 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 before, you know, submit your work. And I would look at it. I would look letter by letter by letter by letter. I would try so hard to make sure it's correct. And I would not see. Everything would be looking perfect to me. And then the word would be missing like half of it letters. And that's why there was a theory that I'm maybe a little, you know, not so smart. So I got a tutor. So my parents hired this lady to be my tutor. And she happened to be an editor. She actually was an editor, and tutor was just like her like side gig. She was a hustler. And I told her, I like mentioned that I writing something, and she thought it's a great exercise for me to actually write something and bring to her so she can check it, and good practice. And she like said, okay, let's do it, like basically you will bring it as your homework. Like she didn't say it's like harsh like deadline obviously, but I actually wanted to share it with someone, and I actually liked that someone actually wanted to see it, a quote unquote. Obviously it's not about the story, and I actually took the schedule that she gave to me, and I decided to bring her chapter every week. And this would help me to finish the book. Like I would just keep going. I would not be like, oh, I'm waiting for my inspiration to hit me. No, I was like, look, it's due in a week, so I'm gonna write it. Like obviously like a crappy version. I would never check my grammar thoroughly, but then I would write it. And eventually the book got finished. And it was, I think I checked the other day, it's 95,000 words. It's a book. In my mind, obviously the story was longer than one book. In my mind, it was just one book out of 3, because everybody did fantasy and trilogies. So I assume we gotta do it like this. So my story is naturally split into 3 arcs currently, like 3 books, what was 3 books. But I had a book, and actually my editor called my mom, and she said, you know what, it's actually, I think it's something that we can work on, and it looks like a real book if we work on it. And we actually polished it. My editor used her editor skills, and we edited the thing multiple times. It was clean, and the system for publishing in Russia, I don't know, at least back then, was not quite what it is in English-speaking world. It's not like you send it to an agent, you have an agent connects you to the publishing houses or to the editors, I don't know. No, I just submitted it to different publishing houses, and a couple replied, and one said that they like it, but they want to change it a little bit because they have some like ongoing series, like a branding of books type of thing. And they wanted to change my story so it blended with this kind of like series they're branding. And they were like, yeah, well, we can change it like this. And yeah, totally. And I was like, oh, what? No, what? Of course not. Nobody's changing my story to fit some random stuff. What do you mean? My story is meant to fit my, trilogy. Get out of here. So I was like, nope, not interested. And actually it was very easy to say no to some people. Like, Russia doesn't pay well to artists at all. It's actually not just depressing, it's appalling and disrespectful how little they pay artists. Like, I literally, when I would freelance, and I would freelance professionally, like, I would get like maybe $80 for a cover for a book for big publishing houses. Like, that's how much they pay. And they were giving like the prices. It's like basically like, well, you publish your book for thank you, and you maybe get something if it sells, or yeah, like all they will give something like 5,000 rubles would be, oh my god, how many dollars it would be? Or maybe 150. Oh no, not even this. It's actually at this point with inflation, it will be like $100. They will pay you for your book. Thank you for your services. So it was easy to say no, thank you, no. And there was another publisher who was interested, and they said, well, we'll publish this book, but please don't pursue writing as a career. You're gonna be hungry, you're gonna die from hunger. We have professors, like crazy smart people who are writing insane books, and they're dying from hunger because this industry doesn't pay at all. And that was all very depressing. So I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna approach myself a smaller publisher, and that's what I did. And because the publisher was smaller, I got more options for what I can do with the book. So we published it in 2010, and I actually got to do a lot of illustrations inside. I did the cover that I think looks really bad now, but you can see what it is. I don't think there's any copies available this time. I think it's sold, not because, oh my god, it was so popular, but like it wasn't a big amount, but it sold, and you can find it in libraries officially and everything. And I think the only copies that remain, my mom has some of them. So yeah, so it was a novel, and I was like, okay, then I can continue writing novels. So I started writing book 2. And while book 1 took me around a year to complete, with most of the editing included, and I was like, well, writing is pretty easy, and with every chapter I got better handle on of the details of writing, how to do this, and I was like, oh my god, writing is so awesome. But then I started writing book 2, and there were several problems right away. Book 1 is written from POV of one of my protagonists. Her name is Sakai. That's her, and she is a protagonist of book 1. We only see the story from her eyes only, and she is 16-year-old girl. So it was very fitting because I think I was close to that age when I was writing it, and it was very easy to, write her. Not that I got her personality. Actually, this character gave me a lot of problems in a different way. I do another video on this topic, but the way she perceived the world, and it's like the feeling of the story when it's seen through the eyes of this particular young person, is very different in comparison to other characters' experience. So my second book, I knew that second book started to branch out, and it started to show perspective of other people. And I have a second protagonist. His name is Croy, and he was obviously in book 1, but in book 2 we get him as a main narrator, and we have several POVs. We have Sakai's still, we have his, and we have like 3 more, I think. So, but he was the primal one, and he is 25 years old, and it wasn't back then, it was older than I was. And he is a very smart person. Not saying that Sakai is stupid, but he is very, very intelligent. He is a storyteller, what in that world is kind of type of magic where he's basically a badass writer. Basically they use something like writing stories to create magic, kind of like using language of literature to kind of like rewrite scripts for their reality. That's kind of the concept of storytelling in my story. So he is a smartass, and he also has a more difficult past. He has a very traumatic past, and he is very, like, his story is very, very gray and complicated, and got way more nuance, more like gray areas, and he appears to be a very mysterious character in book 1, but in book 2 in his head, and there's a lot going on. And it's not like that was difficult, that was hella interesting. I was like, oh my god, but it was brand new way of writing, and immediately the tone of the story shifted with his perspective alone. And obviously the story started to become more complicated, more political. And I think there is a time in your life, I noticed with many artists and many writers that I know, that kind of when they go in from their teenage years to their early 20s, that where a lot of shift in mentality happens. Not like you become smarter, but you lose this naivete, and you become seeing world as a more complex thing, and you realize a lot of aspects of it that you've never seen before. And relationships between people, you understand how complex they can be, and all of that. And how human psyche is like a bottomless pit of complexity. So yeah, the tone of the story shifted immediately. I loved book 2. I actually liked it way more. I realized, you know what? Like in book 2 also, this is where I realized it's not like I wrote this and I enjoyed it and I liked what happened, but I was proud of like a chapter that just completed, because there was more stuff that I had to pack into this, not just plot, like development of characters' psyche, how they reacted, how they reveal stuff to the reader. I learned a lot about writing in book 2, like a lot. And not like just writing, but like storytelling, what you can even do with your story. Like I had the whole door open in my head and I realized, oh my God, the power of the story is limitless. There's so many things you can do with the idea, and so many things you can do with characters. There is no limits, you can do whatever you want. And I was like so overwhelmed as well. This book, I started writing, I think, when I was in first year of my university, maybe like 2009, 2010. And I was still writing it closer to my last year. So it was like I was on my fourth year of writing it. And something started feeling also weird because I almost completed it by this point. There was around 2 chapters left, and I was proud of every single chapter that I did. But I realized this story is in direct conflict with book 1. So I realized if there is so much complexity in book 2, where is all of this in book 1? Like, it's like a dimension was added to book 2, and I realized that those stories don't match anymore. And even though plot-wise they're natural continuation of one another, but on a like emotional level, on like the vibe of the story, they were not quite matching. And even though with every book 2 chapter that I would do, I would be proud of it. I would be like, wow, I think I did something really good here. I was still not satisfied just because it wouldn't match the book 1, and it didn't feel like I completed the story, like something was not working. Yeah, even the character of Tsukai, she also had a major change in book 1, or for the comic she will have like something major is going to happen in the end of the volume 1 of the comic, and it changes her, and I lost connection with her a little bit because it was my first time learning to write serious emotional stuff, like when people go through things that change them, through crises that change them. And I was happy not to have some crazy emotional crisis in my life. Or, to be honest, I didn't think I did. Obviously, later on I realized there's some stuff in my childhood that was very interesting and needed examination. But back then I didn't understand how all the psychological stuff works, and I needed to know. And while I was doing book 2, I would learn it while I was writing PinkRae, but with Tsukai it was such a sudden shift, and I didn't quite know how to handle it and how the character would transform. Like there are certain problems with character of Tsukai just because I can only know her as I write her, I cannot plan for who she is. She reveals herself from chapter to chapter. Yeah, so that was the problem. And I was at this point writing this book for almost 4 years. And even though it was more polished than book 1 was, obviously, before I gave it to the editor, because I was actually going through it multiple times, I still didn't feel like it's a success. I don't know if it makes sense, but like even though I liked it more, I felt like this book is breaking the story. So I started thinking, oh my God, I either have to rewrite it in a way that matches book 1, or I have to rewrite book 1. And all of this is very discouraging, and I didn't know what to do. So instead, I was just drawing the story. I was drawing illustrations for it and just posting them online, trying to experience the story without writing it, trying to show it like in a visual way. And at this point, I started kind of like playing around with another story that I was kind of doodling as a comic. I think I did a couple pages. That's a cool idea. It's called Emerald Beads. It's dope. I actually think it's very dark story. It's very different. It's like dark as hell. But yeah. And I was thinking about the story, and it was easier to create because the story didn't have this gaping problem. So I noticed how my mind started shifting away and away from the Book of Contradictions. And at one point I was like, no, that story means a lot to me. I will not be doing this to this story. I will not be abandoning it by no means. Like my heart aches thinking about it. So I was like, you know what? How about I go back to the comic format? But this time I was actually doing freelance professionally for some time, and I finished all my art schools that to be finished, and I had a very solid footing in drawing. And yeah, actually I earned all the money that I needed for my college in Canada by doing freelance illustrations. So I knew I'm capable to do it on a different level now. So, and besides, people online would ask me, who are those characters you keep drawing? Who are them? And obviously they could notice that those characters had a story. They're not just random illustrations. And the only thing I could tell them was like, hey, there is a book, but it's in Russian, but this scene you're seeing it from book 2 that is not published. So, and also I realized I'm going to Canada, and my world will be primarily English speaking. Besides, all the freelance that I did with international people. I worked with Russia and Ukraine a little bit, and it's a story for another day. And so I decided, well, hey, so I thought, I can't write a book in English, but I can't write a comic in English. That's less level, like lower level of English that is needed. And while doing the comic, well, now I can actually do it way faster. And also, I can rewrite the story a little bit. I can reposition the pieces, and I can create the Book of Contradictions 2.0. And I was like, okay, let's translate chapter 1 from the book to a comic format and see how it goes. And that's what I did. I did it in black and white, and it was pretty easy, and I loved it. And I realized, you know what, I think I can do this. And then I started drawing chapter 2, and I did it in color. And it's like a story of my life. It looks like I would do chapter 1 and then I would do chapter 2 better and realize, oh no, I have to go and redo chapter 1. So I did that in color, and it was not matching with chapter 1 again. But at this point I came to Canada, and I was doing some freelance for Vitaly, and he is an artist of his own. He has his own comic, Romantically Apocalyptic, online, and he was going to Comic-Con, and I was going with him because I did a lot of pieces for him. And he said, well, hey, you have your own comic, how about you print it, and then you maybe can sell it on Comic-Con. And I was like, oh my god, that would be so cool. But also, oh my god, my chapters don't match. That just doesn't look good. So I chaotically painted chapter 1, so now it was in color, to print it and sell it on Comic-Con. And I did went to Comic-Con. I did sell some of them, just saying. And yeah, this is where we currently are. And from that point on, I would draw my comic in color. And now I'm on chapter 5. We're finishing chapter 5, and we're going to be starting chapter 6 in 2020. And now I think I have a solid footing in the story. Now I'm happy how it goes, because now I introduce different POVs already early. So we don't have Tsekai only, we have Kuroi already, and we have other characters there, and already showing the vibe of the story. So I realize how to mix better this dark political aspect of it with like fantasy and magical and very pure imaginative element of it, and how to mix some positivity and naivety on one characters with some gray aspects of another character. And how now there was a moment also when I took 2-year break from creating the comic, because I was going through some shit in my life, and that's actually helped me to realize how to deal with complicated emotional stuff and all the traumas and everything, and on and on. It seems like now I'm on the right path with the story, and whatever difficulties that I stumbled upon the way were there to help me to make it better. I always like when artists tell stories like this, because I think it's important to show how art is messy and how it's okay to change things, and how story has a life of its own, and how it evolves, and how the way we want to tell it changes, and how we change, but the story might stay the same, but we just learn how to tell it better, and how circumstance of our life has to come and go for us to connect with our story even more. And yeah, I think it's very interesting. And if you have stories like this, please leave them below. I really love to read them. I love love listening to other artists talk about it. And yeah, I think there should be more conversation like this, because that's hella interesting. That's something that happens behind the scenes. That's what every artist is dealing with. It's like the story of the story in every artist's life. So yeah, hope you like this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know your stories, and hope you subscribe, because I'm gonna do more videos like this. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a good day. Thank you, guys.